Today, we are talking about one of the biggest drivers of overeating and binge eating. So if you're someone who often feels out of control around food, you eat in a manner that feels frantic. It feels urgent. It feels like you're disconnected and you will eat to a point of physical discomfort, then this episode is going to be super valuable for you. So let's start off with a story of how I came up with the idea for this podcast episode. So over the weekend, Luke and I went to a friend's house. We were going to have a movie night, grab some snacks, grab some food, and have a night in because it was super rainy. There was storms outside. There wasn't much to do. And I actually watched Fight Club for the first time ever. Both my boyfriend and his best friend were actors. They went to theater school. They are major movie buffs. And I didn't grow up around movies. I watched the most classic movies, but there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge. And so I watched Fight Club for the first time. And I have to say, oh my goodness, it was so good. We had Fight Club on our list of movies to watch for the longest time, but I always thought that it was a boxing movie. And so I had a resistance to it. And finally, they told me that it was far from a boxing movie. And so I gave it a try and it was so good. So if you have not watched Fight Club, this is me telling you that you should definitely add that on your list. But this is not what today's episode is about. I digress. So we go out and we grab some food for the night. So we got some rotisserie chicken, we got a pre-made salad kit, we got some chips, we got some popcorn, some snacks for the movie, and we have dinner. I eat my chicken, I eat my salad. I'm full, I'm feeling satisfied. We go to the couch and we start watching the movie, and about halfway through the movie, the boys rip open the bag of chips and they start snacking, and they got Lay's original chips. And I am personally not a huge fan of Lay's chips, but I decided to have one, taste it, and I was like, meh, it was fine. If this was Miss Vicky's sweet chili and sour cream chips, completely different story. But I had the chip, it was fine. I didn't particularly love it. But then a really interesting thing happened right after. And there was like this alarm that went off inside of me. And this alarm happened because I wasn't in my home environment. I was at a friend's house, so I wasn't in my food environment. I couldn't just get up, start snacking, go in the pantry, go in the fridge, grab some food if I do end up getting hungry later. And I wasn't super hungry when this happened, when the alarm went off. But that alarm went like this. You don't know if you're going to have food for the rest of the night. So you might as well eat some chips now, because what if you get hungry later and you're not in your own environment? And just that initial thought, I wasn't hungry in the moment, but that initial thought of not having access to food or to my own food environment triggered this almost subconscious desire to start eating the chips. Even though I didn't like the chips, I didn't need the chips, I wasn't particularly hungry, but there was this voice in my head that was telling me, well, you may not have access to food, and what if you get hungry later? Might as well get some food in your body now in case that does happen. And that right there is one of the biggest drivers of overeating and binge eating that we see in the academy, that I see in my clients. And what that mentality is a scarcity mindset when it comes to food. So having a scarcity mindset with food means that you are concerned with the availability or access to a food to the point where it alters the decisions that you make. A lot of the times, our mindsets when it comes to food, whether it's a scarcity mindset or an urgency mindset, which is another kind of mindset that we talk about in the academy, these mindsets happen on a subconscious level. And we don't know what is driving our behaviors, which is why most people will just blame their lack of willpower, their lack of discipline, their lack of motivation, of self-control for overeating or for eating when they are not necessarily hungry, not understanding the root cause of what's driving these behaviors. And because I've been doing this work for so long and I've gone through my own healing journey, when that happened in the moment, when I had that urge to start eating the chips, even though I wasn't hungry and I didn't even like the food, I stopped and asked myself, what is going on here? What's driving this desire? And I was able to recognize right away what was happening. And it's that I was not in my own environment. I didn't know when I would have access to food. And in that moment, I remembered you have some leftover chicken in the fridge from dinner. And if it does happen that you get hungry later, then you can just have that chicken, or you can have some food when you get home. And just that really subtle shift in my mindset, reminding myself that, oh, food is available and you will be able to have access if you do get hungry, completely eliminated my urge to eat the chips. And I had no desire. And what ended up happening is, I think like an hour later, I got up and I had a tiny piece of chicken, and that was it. And I was good for the night. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, this is something that happens so often on a subconscious level in my clients. And I need to talk about it because I want you to be able to start recognizing what is triggering these patterns. Why do I overeat? Why do I feel this urgent sense that I need to eat something now, even if I don't like the food? And the scarcity mindset can come in that fear that you won't have access to food, or it can come in the fear that you won't be able to eat this food again. So let me give you an example in the first case, when there is that subconscious fear that you won't be able to have access to food again. And notice that these aren't entirely based in facts. Like, even if I was afraid in that moment not to have access to food, it would have been just for the night. And then I would have woken up tomorrow in my own home and had access to food. But this is such a good indication of the fact that your body is always rooted in survival. It always is trying to send you messages, especially on a subconscious level. Like, this is your primal brain working from your ancestry, where food was not always available, when food was inconsistent. This is your brain trying to get you to thrive, trying to get all of your needs met, and your nutrition and having enough and adequate access to food is one of those major needs. And so whenever you find yourself beating yourself up for overeating or for having cravings or for thinking about food, this is simply your body sending you messages about a need that has gone unmet or that could go unmet. And that's the power of your mentality when it comes to your behaviors around food. And that's the power of your biology, the human mechanism that will send a cascade of biological and psychological messages to you so that it gets its needs met. So a good example of when that scarcity mindset will kick in, when there is that fear that food will not be available for a extended period of time. So back when I was in my disordered eating days and I was dieting and I had all of these food rules about what I could or couldn't eat, and I had food rules about the timing of my meals as well. So for me, for some reason, I had created these rules that I could not eat breakfast before 9 a.m. I could not eat lunch before noon. I could not have my snack before 3, could not have dinner before 6, and I had to stop eating before 8 p.m. Those were like my rules, my timing rules, what I would call timing rules around when I could eat. And this completely bypassed my hunger and fullness cues. So even if I was hungry, but it wasn't quote unquote time, I wasn't allowed to eat yet, then I would force myself to push it off. I would have a black coffee. I would drink a lot of water. I would go for a walk until it was my quote unquote allowed time to eat. So at nighttime, let's say I'm eating my dinner and I know in the back of my mind that after 8 p.m., food is not allowed. Like, you are not allowed to eat food. And if I ever did, quote unquote, cave and eat food after 8 p.m., it was just ridden with guilt and shame. And that guilt and shame would trigger even more binge eating, because I would think, well, you've already screwed up, so might as well just take it all the way, eat all the foods, and start again tomorrow. That's the all or nothing mentality, which is another big piece of overeating that goes into the psychological factors that influence our behaviors when it comes to overeating and binge eating and even emotional eating. But going back to my rule. So I had a rule that I could not eat after 8 p.m. So when I was eating dinner, what I would always do, and this would happen subconsciously, is I would end up overeating. I would end up giving my body more food that it needed and that felt comfortable. So if we're working on the hunger scale, which is a tool that I give all of my clients, if we're working on the hunger scale, I would always end up at like a 7, an 8, even sometimes a 9, which was very uncomfortable. Like the pants getting really tight, having to undo your buttons because you feel so full. And I wasn't doing that because I had no willpower or because I had no discipline. I was doing that on a subconscious level because I knew that I would not eat after 8 p.m. So in my mind, what would happen was this little voice would say, well, this is your last meal. And I was so scared of going to bed hungry. I was so scared of waking up in the middle of the night hungry. And I was also so scared of waking up in the morning being starving because, again, I told myself that I couldn't eat breakfast until 9. So if I wake up and it's 6 a.m. and I'm starving because I didn't eat enough last night, then doing my workout, which also I would do a fasted workout, like doing a fasted workout on a starving stomach was really scary for me. And when you have all of these food rules, there isn't a sense of flexibility. It is super rigid. And if you break them, it can trigger a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear. That's what eating disorders and disordered eating really do to you, is these rules are self-imposed, and when broken, they can create a lot of internal turmoil. So because I had this fear of not having access to food, even though it was self-imposed, my brain and your brain does not know the difference between rules that are self-imposed and actual food scarcity and actual food restrictions. Because going back to our ancestors and cavemen, food was scarce and food was limited. And so your brain learns to pick up on those kind of patterns. And so because in my mind, food was limited at night, after I was done dinner, I had this mentality that this is my last time that I can eat, so might as well eat as much as I can and fill myself up and kind of stock up on some food so that it lasts me until tomorrow, 9 a.m. And after healing my relationship with food and breaking free from those food rules and learning to honor my hunger, whether it is 6 a.m. and I need to eat breakfast or it is 9 p.m. and I need to have a snack, giving myself unconditional permission to eat when my body is asking for food actually helped me and will help you pay attention to what levels and what amounts of food feel good for your body. And you no longer feel that urgent need to quote unquote stock up and overeat, thinking that this is going to be the last time that you eat. Because you know that if hunger does strike, you will feed yourself. And that is how you reconnect and you rebuild trust between you, your body, and food. This is such a huge piece of intuitive eating. A really good example of this was just this week on one of our client calls in the Food Freedom Academy on Wednesday. I was talking to one of my clients and she was saying that she noticed that what she would often do in the morning is she would end up eating a really big breakfast and she would overeat. And it didn't feel good for her. And she couldn't quite understand why she kept doing that. And this client, she is a real estate agent and she works a lot and she has big days, big busy days. And after diving deep into what might be going on here, what we realized is that she wasn't making intentional time in her schedule to eat. There wasn't designated times where she knew that she would have access to a snack or to a meal. And so because there wasn't that consistent trust that food would be available, and this wasn't because she was intentionally trying to restrict anymore, but it really was because of a lack of time and a lack of intentional planning, her brain picked up on those patterns. And so in the morning, she would end up having that initial, that internal message of might as well eat as much as we can now because our days usually are chaotic. So I don't know if I'm going to have time to eat a snack or eat a meal. So we need as much food as we can to stock up. So together we found a solution. We put together some strategies. And this is something that we're going to talk about at the end of the episode, is some strategies to get rid of the scarcity mindset, whether it is scarcity about being unable to access food or scarcity around not being able to eat a certain food again. And that takes us to the second aspect of the scarcity mindset, which is the fear that you will not eat a certain food or certain types of food again. And this is commonly known as the Last Supper mentality. So if you are not familiar with what this mentality is, it is the feast or famine response that happens inside your brain, inside your body, that is fueled by the idea of never having this food again. So let's take an example. For me, my food that I always felt so guilty about eating, and that was this food that I had put on a pedestal that was quote unquote unhealthy, that I shouldn't have. This food was pizza. And so I would always avoid it. I wouldn't eat it. If I had a craving for pizza, I would either make a healthy version on some pita bread, which did not taste the same, or I would push off the craving. And then what would happen every once in a while is that either it was the only thing that was available to eat, or I would cave and I would have it if I was having a really bad day. Whatever the reason was, it would happen once every couple of months where I would allow myself, even though it was filled with guilt, I would allow myself to have pizza. A lot of the times what I would also do, this was back in university, is I would eat pizza when I was drunk. Because when you're drunk, it reduces your inhibitions and it also reduces some of that guilt. This is something called drunkorexia. And so I would often have pizza when I was drunk because I was able to delay all of the guilt from eating the food until tomorrow morning. So I would have the pizza, and then because I was so afraid of eating that food and because I would always tell myself that I shouldn't have it, when I would have the pizza, this switch went off in my mind, because then I would say, well, you're having pizza now and you're doing something bad. So you are not going to eat it for another couple of months, because that was my pattern. So might as well eat as much as you can now, because who knows when's the next time that you are going to have it. Even though, once again, these rules were entirely self-imposed. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to pause this podcast if you're driving or walking, and I want you to ask yourself, what foods do you do this with? So maybe that's ice cream. And even if you eat it more often, you might not just eat it every couple of months. You might eat it once a week, but you still, every time you eat that food, tell yourself, I'm going to be better tomorrow. I'm not going to do this again. And even if you do end up doing it again, because we always do, because that's the cycle of restricting and binging, you still tell yourself, I'm doing something bad and I'm not going to do it again tomorrow. So I'm just going to eat it all. And sometimes it's not just the one food, right? Sometimes it's you've broken a rule, you've eaten something quote unquote bad. So might as well eat all of the bad foods. So you have it starts with like the cookie. All right, you've had the cookie, so then you eat the entire sleeve. Well, you've already eaten an entire sleeve, so might as well just eat the ice cream and the chips and the cereal and everything that you would normally feel guilty about. And again, that is where that all or nothing mentality kicks in, right? I'm going to go all in. I'm going to have all of the foods. And then tomorrow I'm going to get back to being quote unquote good. And that scarcity mindset, again, it happens on such a subconscious level that you don't even know it's there. And that's the biggest problem when it comes to diet culture is they will make you feel like you are the problem, right? You are the weak one and you have low willpower and you need our plans, right? You need our app. You need to calorie count. You need to count your macros. You need to measure your food. You need to create all of these rules around how you can eat without actually letting you know and telling you and making you understand that the reason why you are behaving this way around food is actually because of diet culture. It's because of the very same rules that they're telling you is going to help you fix your problem. So how do you get over this scarcity mindset? How do you get rid of it? So the first thing that I will say is that if you've been dieting for 2, 5, 10 years, or even the majority of your life, this is not something that is going to go away overnight. It's something that you are going to have to keep working through. And that's why I always recommend getting some kind of support as you're going on your intuitive eating journey, whether that's a coach or a program or a therapist to help you. Because like I've been saying this whole episode, this all happens on a subconscious level. We don't know what we don't know. We don't see what we don't see. This is what is called a blind spot. And so when we don't know that this is happening, it's really hard to rewire the subconscious. And rewiring your subconscious, it is a process. It is something that requires consistency. It is something that requires practice. And so to do it time and time again, because it is so easy when you do overeat and when you do binge to fall back into your default programming, which is to blame yourself and to think that you have low willpower. And every time that you do that, you reinforce to your brain that you cannot be trusted around food. And that's not the case. The case, and every time that you tell yourself that you can't be trusted around food is when you double down on the rules and you double down on the scarcity mindset. When it's the scarcity mindset and the rules that are causing the behaviors in the first place. Do you see how much of a vicious cycle this is? And this is how you get stuck in the diet cycle. If you want to know more about like the diet cycle and what fuels it, then I recommend that you go back into one of my first episodes. It is episode 8, how to break free from the yo-yo diet cycle, so that you can understand a little bit better about what is happening all on the subconscious level out of our awareness. But it absolutely is possible to break free from that scarcity mindset. To give you an example, this is one of the wins that we got from one of our clients inside the Food Freedom Academy. She posted in the Facebook group, win for today. Had this delicious burrito for lunch today at work. Left a little bit behind as I was full and satisfied. One of our drug reps came by shortly after today with some ice cream treats. They looked delicious, but I checked in with myself and thought, you can totally have one, but maybe in a little bit when you're not so full and you'll enjoy it more. When I got home from work, I realized I never had one. My burrito kept me satisfied all afternoon, and I'm good with that. Maybe I'll have one tomorrow, maybe not, but I know that I can if I want to. And just giving yourself permission and reassuring to your brain that I can have this food later. It's not going away. There isn't an urgent need to have this food now because it might get taken away or because I'm going to feel bad if I have it. Just reminding your brain of that and providing safety to your brain helps you make decisions in the moment that honor your body. So like I said, rewiring a scarcity mindset, it takes some work. It takes some time. But what I want to do is I want to give you a couple, 5 tips to help you get started right away so that you can start becoming more aware of when this does happen and stop blaming yourself for a lack of willpower and actually start getting to the root cause of it all. So number one thing that I want you to do is I want you to evaluate if you have any food rules around the timing of your food. So if you have a history with intermittent fasting, there is a good chance that you have some rules about what is your window of eating, of when you can or can't eat, regardless of your hunger and fullness cues. That might be between noon and 8. That's a very common one. So for me, it was very arbitrary, 9, 12, 3, and 6, right? So ask yourself, do I have any rules? And another rule that I see often in my clients, it was in me as well, it's these rules around how much time you have to have between your eating experiences. So for example, I could only eat every 3 hours or more. And again, this was probably self-imposed from years of reading about diet advice and diet rules. And so what are your rules that you have around timing of your food? And you might notice if you tell yourself, I can't snack at night, that could be a massive contributor to your nighttime binge eating, to your nighttime overeating at dinner, because you tell yourself this is the last meal of the day. So pause this podcast and write down on the notes app on your phone or a pen or piece of paper all the rules that you have regarding the timing of your food. This is going to help you get some insight on what might be driving and feeding this cycle of overeating. The second thing that I want you to do is I want you to take inventory of your scarcity mindset when it comes to food. What are all of the foods that when you're having it, you're telling yourself that you shouldn't be doing it, you're feeling guilty about it, and you're telling yourself, I'm going to be better tomorrow? What are some of those quote unquote binge foods that tend to lead to an full-blown binge, right? So maybe that list could be long, especially if you've been dieting for a long time. You have picked up so many rules, you have created so much fear around food that list could involve bread, cereal, fruits even, right? If you've done Optavia, then fruits might be in there. Ice cream, chocolate, donuts, right? Candy, chips. So write down and take inventory along on the same piece of paper that you wrote down your rules about timing, and write down all of those foods that you tell yourself when you're eating them that you're going to be better tomorrow, right? And that you won't have them again. Even though you do end up having them again, that's not what your brain is telling you. Then, once you've gotten some insights on what are some of the rules that are driving your behaviors, what I want you to do is, let's say that you are someone who tends to eat, like if you are an unconscious eater, which means that you're often eating on the run, you have a very busy lifestyle, you don't necessarily make time to sit down and eat and be intentional. What I really want you to do is start by making an effort to squeeze in some intentional time to eat, right? So if we go back to my client who was often overeating, not because of restriction, but because of a busy schedule, what we put together as a plan was making sure that she was squeezing in intentional time for a snack and for a lunch. And I want you to start small and realistic, right? So I didn't say to her, let's do an hour for lunch, because I know as a business owner that can be really hard to do when you are so caught up in the work. And so for me, like I started with 30 minutes at lunch, and then I moved it to an hour at lunch, right? So now I have an hour where no one can book a call with me. That is my hour, knowing that I can slow down, I can enjoy my lunch, I can be present, I can be mindful. And then I've got a snack in the afternoon, and I've got a snack in the morning. So If you are someone who is constantly busy and eating on the run, and maybe subconsciously you overeat because you know that this is going to happen, can you start by scheduling 5 minutes for a snack when you need it the most? Maybe it's in the morning. Maybe it's in the afternoon. Can you start by scheduling even just 15 minutes at lunch so that your brain knows that no matter what, it will have access to food. It doesn't need to stock up because there is going to be a snack coming up later. So if you're someone who is constantly busy, who lives a very hectic lifestyle, this strategy is going to be incredibly helpful for you. The next one, so number 4, is I want you to give yourself unconditional permission to eat later. So let's say you're having lunch and you used to have a rule that you can only eat in 3 hours. I want you to give yourself the permission that if you're hungry in half an hour, if you're hungry in an hour, if you're hungry in 2 hours, no matter when your body sends you hunger cues that it needs food again, you will honor them. Same thing for the nighttime, right? So when I stopped having the mentality that my dinner was going to be my last meal and that I couldn't eat after 8 p.m., and I actually gave myself permission to feed my body if it told me at 8 or 9 or even 10 p.m. that it needed food, I would feed it and I would honor that. That greatly and even eliminated my subconscious need to overeat, to stock up for the night and for the morning. And also allowing myself to eat in the morning whenever I needed to. If it was not before 9 a.m., it was before 9 a.m. So give yourself, and again, by giving yourself permission, it doesn't mean that you have to, right? Like just because you tell yourself that you can eat in half an hour, it doesn't mean that you have to if you're not hungry. But just giving yourself that permission, right? It opens you up and it creates a mindset of abundance instead of closing you down and creating that mindset of scarcity. And then my last strategy for you to help you start rewiring your mindset of scarcity is to give yourself unconditional, full permission to eat that food again. So you know that list that you created, right? With the pizza and the ice cream and the donuts and whatever you put on your list. When you're having it, number 1, I want you to do it and I want you to be so intentional with it and I want you to enjoy the heck out of it and I want you to do it guilt-free, right? So when you're having that cookie, a lot of the times what people do is they disconnect because if that's one of their food rules and they feel bad about doing it, they'll disconnect and they won't actually enjoy it when that food's sole purpose is to be enjoyed. So if you choose to have that cookie or that candy or that ice cream, number 1, be mindful and be so intentional and enjoy the heck out of it. You're going to have a completely different experience than if you were to disconnect and numb and just like do what I call fog eating, where you're eating, but you're not really fully present. And you can know if you do this, if after you're done eating, you're like, wow, I ate that, but I didn't really taste it. I don't even know how it tasted. And I don't even think I enjoyed it. That's what fog eating really is. So number 1 is be mindful. But another way to reduce that scarcity mindset, let's take cookies, for example, because I know that this is a very common one that I hear, right? I have one cookie and then I have to eat the entire sleeve. Give yourself full permission to eat this food again, right? So let's say you have the one cookie. It was so good and you're full now. You're satisfied. Well, if you tell yourself then that you've done something bad and you can't have this food again, then you're going to eat the entire sleeve and then just get rid of it, get it out of the house. But instead, if you know, oh, I can have this again in an hour. Like if in an hour I'm hungry again and I'm craving it again, I can have another cookie. If I want to have a cookie tomorrow, I can have another cookie because there's nothing wrong with me having this cookie. Just giving yourself that unconditional permission to have it again is going to reduce that urge and that desire, that scarcity mindset is going to reduce that intense urge to eat it all now and just get rid of it. So those are my 5 strategies. So let me do a little recap. Evaluate, number 1, if you have any food rules around timing. Number 2, take inventory of your scarcity mindset when it comes to food, right? So which foods do you feel bad and do you tell yourself that you can't have again? Number 3 is make intentional time to eat, whether that is 5 minutes for a snack or 10 minutes for a meal. If you have a very busy and hectic schedule, then this is for you. The 4th one is to give yourself full and unconditional permission to eat later. And number 5 is give yourself full and unconditional permission to eat that food again. So your action item after listening to this episode is to do those 2 first strategies. So write down your rules around timing and your rules around food. I want you to write them down. And what's even better is I want you to take a picture. So whether that's a screenshot of your notes app or a picture of the paper where you wrote this down, and I want you to share it with me. You can share it with me on Instagram, send me a DM, because I want to be able to hold you accountable. I want to be able to support you and to help you, because even if you weren't able to make it into the last round of when my online program started, and we're not open right now. We will open in a couple of months, but because we are not open right now, I want to still be able to help you and I want to be able to coach you. So send me a DM with a picture so that I can help support you. And if you know someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, because I can tell you that the scarcity mindset runs in very many people, more people than you can imagine. And if you have ever dieted, then this is definitely one of the reasons causing your overeating and binge eating. So if you know someone in your life who struggles with this as well, send them this episode. This could be so valuable for them. And if you got value from it, so can they. So send them that episode. And I hope that this was helpful for you. I am so incredibly grateful for every single one of you. The DMs, the emails that I get about this podcast making such a big impact on your life means everything to me. And before we sign off, I want to remind you that no matter how much you feel like you are a lost cause, no matter how long you have been struggling and feeling out of control around food and trying to figure this out, I want to remind you that you are not broken. I have worked with clients who had been dieting for 20, 30, 40 years. One of my clients was 67 and she had been dieting since she was in her 20s. And when you have the right strategies, the right framework, the right approach, and the right guidance, this is so possible to overcome. Take it from me, a chronic ex-binge eater who now has full freedom and ease and just a natural relationship with food. So I wanted to remind you that I'm so grateful for you. I hope you're having an amazing summer. You're allowing yourself to relax, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.